Inspiration, clarity, confidence, and wholehearted business strategy. Welcome to Your Next Chapter, the podcast especially for women in their 40s and beyond who know that business and personal development go hand in hand. Tune in each week for marketing, mindset, and personal growth strategies, along with inspiring stories from women around the world who are creating new businesses and lives that are personally fulfilling and financially rewarding. If you're looking to create a business and life you love, you're in great company. Let's find out what will unfold in your next chapter. I'm your host, Angela Raspis, and I'm so delighted that you're here.
Hello there, this is Angela Raspis, and you're listening to episode 10 in the Your Next Chapter podcast. Thanks for spending your time with me today. Now, we are looking at a really important concept here today. It's all about your decision making and looking at the motivation behind the decisions that you're making, whether they are coming from fear or coming from love. Now, my guest today is Barb Wade, who's a speaker and author and a coach who's been right on the leading edge of transformational coaching for over 15 years. Now, Barb works with high achievers who, despite what's going on externally, despite what the accomplishments look like, are nevertheless finding themselves yearning for a bit more freedom, more joy, and more meaning in their lives. This is why I really wanted to have this conversation with Barb, because really that's what we're looking for in our next chapters, isn't it? That real desire for fulfillment and joy. Well, Barb herself, she really knows that hole that you can fall into, almost like a quiet desperation that can exist even if all the boxes are ticked, if the achievements that you're doing look high. And the clients that she works with, through an exploration of really authentic priorities and values and dreams, they release all those relationships and circumstances that are draining or depleting them, and instead they build up lives that are really vibrant and purpose-driven. She's an absolute joy to speak with. She frequently talks at conferences, and she's on lots and lots of industry panels, and she was the official life coach for the Fine Living channel for 8 years. She lives in northern Colorado with her husband and her 2 gorgeously spirited daughters. And I've been fortunate enough to actually meet Barb and work with her. She was my own mentor and coach back in 2014 and 15, and I met her after traveling to a couple of conferences over in America. She really has that spirit and that spark that just draws you to her. So the conversations that we're having today are really around that. How do we make decisions that support us much, much better in helping us move forward into achieving our visions? It's too easy for us to make decisions that are not necessarily from our heart, that really can come from fear or scarcity or lack. And how do we recognize that and make decisions that support us better? Well, as with all of the episodes, we have a wonderful download resource from my guest. And this one is a checklist on the questions to ask yourself so that you can lean into a decision and make sure it's coming from the right place for you. Now, to access that Making Decisions from Love checklist, you can go to angelaraspis.com/10 download. That's number 10, 10, download. And you'll access this wonderful, short, but very powerful and very thought-provoking resource exercise so that you can make the decisions in your next chapter business and life that really help you expand and find that joy and that meaning that Barb and I talk about so deeply in this wonderful conversation. So I won't have you waiting any longer. Let's move forward and find out all about bringing more joy and integrity into your life.
Well, hey, Barb, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I really appreciate that because I know how busy your life is and what you're juggling at the moment. But I'm really particularly excited about talking with you because I know that right now you're poised on the edge of your next chapter. And I know you've got so many juicy insights to really share with my listeners today about how it feels to be stepping into this new version of you. So thank you for joining me.
I am thrilled to be here. Of course, I'm excited to talk to you.
Awesome. Well, look, let's really get straight into it, shall we? We know that overall, the next chapter in business and life can sometimes leap right out in front of you quite suddenly. Sometimes it's an overnight thing that just things have to change because of unexpected circumstances. But on the other hand, sometimes it creeps up on you. This growing sense of, I'm not happy doing what I'm doing any longer. There's something else that's calling me, or something that I'm wanting to step into, and the time is now. So out of those two, which has been true for you? Has it suddenly leapt in front of you, or is this a growing desire to change and to move into a next chapter?
Well, oddly enough, they've both happened in my life, and you're so right that it can go either way. The biggest change I made in my life was leaving a prestigious corporate career, the thing I went into right out of grad school, and being in an industry and moving up the ladder, and switching from that into a completely new direction, which was working in the field of deep personal growth. Right, it's a pretty big change there, and I'll speak to that one first because that was a slow nagging. Like, first I realized I am really unhappy in this career, and I'm at the top of the game, and at that time I was working for Steven Spielberg. I think you know that about my story. And so I was in the studio system in Hollywood, and it had risen the ladder, and realized I was on a ladder I didn't even want to be on. Like, I'd risen the ladder, and it wasn't even a ladder that was really an authentic fit for me to begin with. But I'd been such a career rush to keep moving forward and achieving more that I never took the time to recognize I wasn't fulfilled. So little by little by little, I started realizing I am burning out. This is not my passion. This is not my heart's desire. This work doesn't have real meaning for me. I'm good at it, and it's gratifying to a certain extent, but gosh, it's lacking meaning. And so little by little, I went on a little inquiry about what do I care about and what do I want to do, and if I were to change, what would it look like? And what I want to encourage people to do is that I gave myself some space to have an inquiry. It was almost like I had a wall almost instantaneously, like you referenced, that I can't do this anymore. This is not working. But then I gave myself a slow and steady exploration of what do I want the next thing to do. And I'll stay where I am, and I'll use it to support this exploration, this phase of inquiry. And through that phase of inquiry, I started to really look at all the themes in my life and how much personal growth I had done on myself as the client with different coaches, therapists, counselors, trainings, workshops, and came to realize that was the field I wanted to move into, and then came to discern what I wanted to do in that field. So little by little, I got to clarity, and then I did make that leap and that transition. So actually, now that I think about it, there was a little bit of both qualities there.
Can I ask, when I loved how you said you took the time to recognize that you weren't fulfilled, and then you started this inquiry. Were there particular questions that you found, like, that you were asking yourself that helped you reveal or helped you uncover what the next steps were going to be for you? Was there anything in particular that you were really questioning?
Well, one question was most prominent for me. It's funny you should ask. But what I felt more than anything was a lack of meaning in what I was doing. I was also burnt out, working too many hours, not in a role I loved. Like, there were all kinds of things I could have shifted and corrected. And I could have asked, well, what do you want to do? And what role would you like to have? And what hours would you like to work? And I could have gotten caught in that minutia. And instead I thought to myself, why are you here? Why are you here on this planet? Like, what do you uniquely have to give and to gift other people? What would give your life meaning? And let's just start there. Let's not worry about where to go or how to get there, or whether it's feasible or how old I am and whether I can start over and all these crazy things, your ego wants to tell you and what's going to look like. Barb, what would get you to wake up in the morning feeling you're contributing? What would give you meaning? What would give you purpose? And everything stemmed from that question.
I think that's the most powerful question. And I've found with so many of the women that are in the Next Chapter community, that's exactly what they hone in on. It's that things have changed. I want to make a contribution. I need fulfillment. There needs to be meaning in what it is that I do. Naturally, the flip side of that is that we want and deserve to be well compensated for what we're doing in terms of, creating an abundant income or an abundance of time or an abundance of love, whatever is important to us. But it has to be tied back to meaning. I can't just get out of bed and do things that no longer light me up. We seem to get to this point, this jumping off point. And I think you've been at that point a couple of times, haven't you?
I really have. And it's just a fascinating and very much normal rite of passage, I found. When we're younger, our perspective on the world is so different. And I think we do hit that point where the external achievement starts to matter so much less than the internal fulfillment and sense of being on the right path. And as you know, as part of my story, even in the past, very short while, I built a very, very big coaching practice and a big coaching business here in the States. And, we serve thousands of people, and it's, I've got a staff of 3 others in addition to myself, and we've built this big thing. And even I have shifted the direction and the focus and the purpose of this coaching company based on another inner tug about where I'm meant to serve the most. And one might say, what are you doing? You're leaving the structure that's been so successful, and you're well known in this other thing, and you're doing this, that, and the other thing, and don't rock the boat and don't change it, and it's paying your children's college tuition. And and again, though, you get to a point where the next nagging happens. The next inner knowing starts to get louder and louder and louder. And you can stuff it down for a little while. I don't know if you've ever tried to. But it gets loud enough that you go, you know what? I'm being called into this next chapter. I'm being called into this next direction. And I can't ignore it. I can't ignore it. If it's coming from intuition, if it's coming from inner knowing, I've got to trust. I've got to trust and follow along. And so you're right. I have done these kind of crazy, leaps from one paradigm to the next paradigm to the next paradigm. And the news I can share is I've survived them all. So anybody who's worried, this will be the end of me and all will go to ruin if I leave what I'm secure in to do something crazy and adventurous, and that's a spirit-led passion, but it's a risk, and I don't know how it's all going to work out. You're in good company. That's been how I felt every time I've left something stable and prestigious and structured for the great unknown. And every time, not only have I survived, but as you know, my life has changed in wondrous ways, and I've been of deeper service on the planet and achieved a deeper level of fulfillment each time. So that's why I love the topic of your whole series here,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so good to hear that, because there is so much fear that can be involved in taking this leap. Particularly, I really focus in on, business and life success beyond your 40s, because sometimes there is that fear around, as you were so rightly saying, I've done all this and I know this so well, and this is going good. Am I a bit stupid to jump? Is it a bit risky? It's like, what am I doing? Especially if you've got people around you who aren't necessarily as supportive. I've done exactly what you're talking about as well. I left from corporate. I started my marketing agency. It grew. Staff, offices, all of that. Ticked the boxes. But yes, for me as well, there was that growing feeling on the inside. This just isn't it any longer. I guess I could have stayed in that space and pushed through these feelings, dampened them down, sort of tried to quiet the voice and go, this is ridiculous, just keep on doing what you're doing, it's going well. But I couldn't. I just couldn't. There's a great movie and book by the late Wayne Dyer called The Shift, which talks about the shift from ambition to meaning that tends to come across us, or we hit at different stages of our lives when that real desire for contribution kicks in. And I really feel that that's what a next chapter business is all about. It's looking at your life experience and leveraging it and utilizing it as a learning curve for other people. It comes from a place of contribution and desire, almost to teach what it is that you've learned. And I guess in that respect, our prior chapters actually ready us for this change. How did you find that the experiences that you've had are putting you in a better place to actually make this shift, to actually make this move?
It's a great question. Let me see how specific I can be here. The work that I do now, and as you've heard throughout this episode, I've had various incarnations of myself. But the work I do now is definitely, absolutely, unequivocally built upon the foundation that's come before it, without question. And I think that as I've forayed into each adventure, I've gotten a deeper understanding of myself. I've gotten a deeper understanding of how I tick. I've been able to discern what my real gifts and talents are. I've been able to see how I can show up my best. I've been able to also learn the structures and paradigms and systems in which I don't thrive. So all of those things have contributed, right, to what I'm doing now. But it's interesting because in a very specific way, the work I do now with clients on authenticity and joy and fulfillment and living a fiercely vibrant life, right, outside of expectations, outside of external achievement. And believe me, I support my clients in a lot of external achievement, provided it's aligned, like we're talking about now, provided it's what your heart is calling for, provided it's what makes you sing and experience joy. So external achievement's great. But, I work with people on self-worth and self-esteem and joy and fulfillment from the inside. And it comes right on my own history of initially deriving all my self-worth from the outside. Like what I do now is so based on my prior life, like you're saying. And, early on, all my self-esteem came from the outside, and all the things I achieved, and some of my story, but I starred on an American television series as an actress. And I went to Oxford in England and got a full scholarship for a master's degree there. I mean, crazy things that I thought were finally going to make me happy or make me fulfilled or make me have arrived as a viable grown-up, or I don't know what I was thinking. And I've done all these different iterations of career. And it's funny, I've come back now to work with people who are very much where I was, right? Who are disillusioned that all their external achievement has not brought them the fulfillment and the daily comfort and joy and authenticity and vibrancy that they thought, and are chasing after the next external achievement or the next expectation coming from the outside. And so in a very specific way, what I do now wouldn't be possible if I hadn't had the journey before, when I was in a place of pain and suffering and depression and despair. And now all of that has turned into my biggest contribution on the planet. And I think for many of us, I'll just make this last point, that the thing we have to teach and mentor and give and share that especially does come after 40, and I couldn't agree with you more. I really saw my own shift and see the shift with my clients around 40 plus, is almost always born of some of our prior pain. It's so interesting. Our prior journey, the places we suffered and struggled, almost always becomes the foundation of that real contribution and that gift and that next chapter career that turns out to be our purpose. And it's just magical the way that works.
Oh, abso-freaking-lutely. And so often we look back, we forget about what I call hindsight, which is to look back on the lessons that we've learned and see, how we've traversed that road. And we can often then help another person along that road because we know where the potholes are. It's not a case of sitting up on a mountaintop and preaching, hey, the view's great up here, I've got all my proverbial shit together now. It's about getting down off that mountain into the pothole with the person who's there now and saying, hey, I've been here. I know the way out. Take my hand. That to me is the epitome of a next chapter business. And I love the way what you just said before. What I do now would not be possible without the journey that I've already taken. And so that's real reassurance for my listeners to hear the fact that everything that you have done up to this point is the fuel for you moving forward into the future. Now, we don't live in our past, but we should certainly reference it, because there are the lessons that have given us the strength and given us the insights to then lend that to other people. I mean, we don't have to have, got a terrible tale of woe that we leverage. It can be simply that we've found a better way. We've built a better mousetrap, and we now want to share that with other people. But I'd like to look for a moment, because that concept of helping people live a joyful and a vibrant life that is far more fulfilling, which is what you do now, because you've met that spot, you've reached that spot yourself. But to get there in the first place, to go, you know what, I want to turn this into, or I want this to be the business message that I take forward, there's quite often fear or apprehension or some self-doubt about the ability to take what you've learned and to leverage that into a business. And I know, like with all the episodes that we have in the Next Chapter podcast, we've got a wonderful download which everyone can have that will take them deeper into this subject. And what we're focusing on with this particular download is that ability to look at love versus fear and how to make those spirit-led decisions, which are often what is needed when you're going to move into a next chapter business. So I'd love you to explain a little more about what people are going to discover and what you can take us through with that love versus fear concept.
This is something I love talking about, so you better watch the clock and start waving at me like that. It's time, stop talking. Because this is one of the most instrumental tools that, again, I love teaching because it transformed my life when I was in the hole and when I was in the place of a lot of despair and hopelessness. So the tool, and as you said, it's explained in more detail in the download that goes with today's episode. But the tool, for the most part, has to do with checking the motivation underneath any decision. So let me explain a little bit what I mean. I might make a decision to take a particular action. Now, I might make that decision from a foundation of love, and love can look like generosity, trust, creativity, abundance. Those are all variations on love. So my act that I'm going to take, my action or decision that I'm going to take, could be very much founded on those. The same action or decision could be very much founded on fear. And fear can look like lack, I'm going to miss something, the need to control or manipulate, straight up fear, straight out anger or resentment. And the same action I might take in the world, as I'm saying this, could be founded on fear. So let's first just use a little example. So let's make it a simple example. Let's say, as a business owner, as many of your listeners are, and most of us have solo businesses or run our own businesses, so networking is a typically important part. So a really simple example. Let's say there's a night and I'm offered the opportunity to go to a networking meeting. There's a networking meeting. Great people are probably going to be there. Okay. And so I really want to go to this networking meeting. At the same time, I'm feeling a little tired, a little bit burnt out. And so let's just say that's the premise of the pretense, right? Now, if I decide to go to the networking meeting, I could do so from a place of joy. I want to meet new people. I'm excited to share my message. I think there are going to be some wonderful opportunities to serve. And it really feels loving to go. And I'm really in a good place. Or I could choose to go from, I'm going to miss meeting the perfect people. And if I don't go tonight, I'm going to miss people in that room that could have been my clients. And I better go because I don't want to miss that. And I need more money. And if I don't keep myself networking, I'm not going to get more money. And so I've got to do this. Like going to that networking meeting that night, you see how that one decision or action could be predicated on two totally different foundations. Love, right? Generosity, exuberance, contribution, or fear, lack, I'm going to miss something. I need to control my life. I need to manipulate my life. So what I want people to do, and I recommend because I've learned it and do it, is when we're looking at a decision or we're looking at an opportunity and we feel we have an answer about what our choice is, to stop and go, wait a minute, let me just double check. Am I doing this out of love or am I doing this out of fear? And if my motivation is love, great, go for it, do it. If my motivation is fear, what would love say in this situation? What would love have me do in this situation instead? Let me play with it. What would love have me do? So in a situation where maybe I did feel very burnt out and I was tired and I'd had a long day, but out of fear, I was trying to force myself to go to that networking meeting. If I realized that and I said, what would love say? Well, love would say, you're going to get the perfect clients you need. You're not going to miss anything by not being there tonight. It's more loving to take care of yourself and rest. And the right people are coming toward you in all kinds of beautiful ways. Because that would be love-based. That would be based on trust and faith and love and abundance. And then I would go, oh, well, if that's what love would say, maybe I ought to do that action. Maybe I ought to stay home tonight, nurture myself, and trust that the right clients are coming my way, right? So the first step of this exercise is to discern, is my decision or action rooted in love or fear? Wow, how fascinating to know. So you wanted me to speak to the fear that comes up around stepping into a new chapter. Now that I used a simple example, right? When I was moving, when I was moving out of corporate entertainment work, right? I was a studio executive at DreamWorks and in corporate work in the entertainment industry. And I was feeling called to move into coaching and psychology work. Huge difference and a huge change. So I started looking at, okay, let me check each time. Each little decision, am I coming from love or fear? Well, I started to feel that calling to move toward personal growth work. First, the calling, okay, would moving to personal growth work be coming from love or fear? I checked inside. It would be coming from love and trust and joy. The part of me that thought maybe I should stay at DreamWorks and play it safe, and I'd come so far up the ladder, and it was probably foolish to throw away everything I'd already worked for. When I looked at that voice and what was underlying that voice, it was clearly fear. Lack. You're going to lose something you have. You're going to lose money. You've got a great income. Don't rock the boat. So I was able to compare those two and say, okay, love would say, move in the direction of your heart, move in the direction of personal growth, move in the direction of coaching, or your master's degree in therapy and psychology, or, then the next step, okay, would it be, I'm thinking about staying at DreamWorks, though, even though I know I need to move into coaching and work in counseling and psychology, and I already know that. So, but I feel like I should stay at DreamWorks. Well, hold on, let's look at the foundation of that. Is it love or fear? Well, it turned out the voice was saying, stay here so you have some stability, so you have some structure, so you can pay your bills while it is supporting your inquiry and your pursuit of the personal growth work. So I realized staying at DreamWorks was also a loving choice for a time while I was developing my next steps. If that choice at that moment was, oh my God, don't leave. We need the money. We need the money. We need the insurance. We need the structure. I might have gone, okay, maybe the loving thing actually is to leave, right? Maybe the loving thing would be to follow the passion and take the big leap. But in that example, staying where I was for just a few months while I transitioned into the other was also based on self-love, right? Based on trust. Do you have a question?
So what we're seeing there is that they both bring very different energies, and just that description of them, and the word that I'd often use is when you're looking at this and trying to decide, is this love or is this fear? Love feels expansive. Love feels light. Love feels possible. Love feels exciting. And all that, where on the fear side, it feels like it's contracting, it's pushing down on you, it's doing the absolute opposite of expansion. So this is really about self-awareness, and it's about pausing and allowing yourself the space to recognize what it is that you're feeling so that you can then make the decision that best supports you at the time. So self-awareness really feels like it's a key part, isn't it?
It is, and you're beautifully brilliant to point out that you're right. You can feel that the fear-based stuff has a frenetic energy. It's frenetic and it has a contracting. And the love-based decisions, remember, love can look like excitement, joy, contribution, trust, creativity, has a calming feeling and an expansive feeling to it. And your body, if you just close your eyes and get quiet, will tell you. Your body will tell you. And what's neat, I want to point out one distinction. It doesn't mean that a love-based decision doesn't sometimes have apprehension, but it feels like excited apprehension. There are some nerves taking a risk. There are some nerves moving into a next chapter business. It's not that there's no fear. There's some like, oh gosh, there are unknowns, but boy, is this exciting. I heard
the expression once, which is that, I can't remember where I heard it, but it's perfect. Fear is just excitement without breathing. So give yourself that space to breathe. And I think what I'm hearing is that the biggest lesson here for us is trust. It's learning to trust yourself. It's because I swear that one of the biggest things that I've had to go through and learn or unlearn in some ways is that when I'm looking for an answer pause. For God's sake, pause and let the answer bubble up from inside of me. Do not go running off and start polling people. Do not start Googling it. Do not, all of those things. That can be another part, but first stop and allow the answers to start to bubble up from you, because you do know. Your heart knows. Now, I'm a huge believer in following your heart. One of my key words is wholehearted, a wholehearted approach to business and life. But you do have to bring your head along later. But the how you're going to do it, we can work out that strategy and those tactics later. First and foremost, we have to create that vision and that pathway based on what's really calling and pulling you forward. So, for anyone who's listening right now to this episode, what's your heart telling you? Because it's there. If you pull over to the side of the road, if you're driving, what's your heart telling you? Because that desire never goes away. And as you said at the beginning, and I had the same experience, it starts to get louder and louder. And the universe has a way of smacking you over the side of the head. If you don't listen, it sometimes needs to do something a bit more drastic to get your attention.
And let me add to what you're saying, because some of us are newer at listening to our intuition. There's a point at which every one of us was new to listening to our intuition and listening to what our heart is saying. And that's why this exercise helps. I remember times earlier on in my life where I would think, I think my intuition is to blah, blah, blah. I think that's what my heart is saying. I think that's what my gut is saying. I'm listening, I'm meditated, I've gotten quiet, and I really think this is it. And then I'll put it through the fear-love test and realize, it's all rooted in fear. It can't be what my heart or intuition was saying. I thought it was, because I was trying, but oh my God, my ego slipped in there, masquerading as my intuition, And I uncovered that when I did this test. What's the foundational motivation underneath this decision? Fear versus love. And then I went, okay, that's not really intuition, because I've got this overdeveloped brain, and it can do a good job of convincing me something is my authentic gut feeling sometimes. So that's another place I use this. When I feel something from my heart, I double check it. I double check it, and then I go, yep. And I will tell you, and I really want to leave people with this one thought. Any decision rooted in love is the way to go, and it will all work out, and you don't need to know how. And I am the person who did not want to let go of control around knowing how. But I have to tell you, every decision that's coming from love and trust is spirit-led, and the universe will line up to support you. And I'm a living, breathing example of this. I've changed the direction of my business in this year, right? Last year, had a hugely successful business. I know you, Angela, know the gross income level of my business prior, and the following and the number of people on my list and all that stuff that ultimately really it doesn't matter that much, and I don't care that much about those things. But people from the outside in would have said, stay there. And yet I know that following heart and following my spirit and knowing what I'm meant to do next is the only way and I know I will not lose. I know I'm going to be just fine and well taken care of. And yet there are certain things that I don't know the answers to yet. I'm still in this beautiful transition. But I'm betting on that making a choice out of love and letting go of the certainty of last year's gross income and the certainty of last year's thousands of people on my mailing list who do it. Again, I could lose all of that, and I'll know I'll be okay, because I'm operating with a foundation of love, trust, intuition, and inviting spirit in. And it's taken someone who used to have a lot of anxiety and nervousness as a daily plague in my 20s and 30s, and I have calmed the hell down. You should ask Tim, who's been with me since I'm 22. I have calmed down. I am calmer. I am present. I breathe. It's a totally different quality of life. So everyone listening, go where you're called to go, follow your heart, trust that spirit's your partner, and I promise your next chapter will be glorious for you and for everyone you're going to serve.
Barb, I can't think of a better way to be drawing this particular conversation to a close. I'm a huge, huge fan of the following your heart, bring your head along later, but start from heart. And I have, that space or that feeling that fundamentally everything's going to be okay. Now, that does not mean that I just sit around on my laurels. I take action, but it is, and to pick up on the word that we both use, it is aligned action. It's aligned with where my heart is leading me, and it is absolutely motivated by love. And that's the epitome of that next chapter business. It's wanting to make the contribution, but that contribution has to be aligned with what is meaningful for you. That's when you get flow. That's absolutely when you get flow. People talk about the idea of if you're doing something you love, then you never work another day in your life. I mean, that's the type of concept that we're talking here, because it doesn't feel like work. It feels like contribution. And I know that I often use the expression, when things are tripping you up, get off self. When you focus instead on who you're here to help and what your purpose is and what your mission is, that's when you can flick back into flow again. So I'm really excited about being able to share, well, first and foremost, this conversation, but also, this episode's downloads, so that we can all take the love or fear test to help guide those decisions and ultimately to come to that place of trust, which is we can only develop that by taking those small, almost risks of trusting ourselves, of following that intuition and seeing where it leads us to. So wonderful, wholehearted conversation. And if our listeners want to find out more about you and about the type of guidance that you can provide, where are we best to pop over and connect with you?
Well, I'm fortunate because I have an easy name, and where you can find out everything that I'm up to and grab a bunch of resources and free stuff and wonderful resources to live a vibrant life that's authentic and joyful is my website. And it's so easy because it's barbwade.com, BARBWADE.com. It's 8 little letters, and you'll always find what I'm up to. I have, trainings and videos and reports and invitations to all kinds of crazy fun stuff about coming from love, coming from self-love, coming from love of others, creating abundance and magic in your life. And it's just, again, barbwade.com. No matter where my next chapters may take me, Angela, no matter what crazy adventures I may go on, I intend to have barbwade.com forever, so you can always find me and see what the hell crazy thing I'm up to next.
Oh, that is perfect. Thank you. And I'm sure a lot of us will pop over to get into those wild and crazy things that are always based in love. That's brilliant. Thank you so much again for your time today. And
I love you to death. Mwah.
And the feeling is very mutual, and we'll be talking again really soon. Thanks for listening to the Your Next Chapter podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please let me know. Pop over to angelaraspis.com to subscribe to the show and leave a review. And whilst you're there, you can also enjoy valuable free resources, including show notes and downloads, along with the Next Chapter community, where you can connect with other wholehearted women on the same journey as you. We'd love to welcome and support you as your next chapter unfolds. See you next time.